Okay, let's briefly summarize the important points about Anaximander. Now, obviously, he's not a great modern scientist, but it's probably not fair to judge him on that basis. But nonetheless, he was the first one who got certain things started. That he was the first one to question kind of the theory of his predecessor, his teacher, Thales. And he thought about it, and he found a perceived kind of logical difficulty in Thales' theory. You know, his objection was that water was essentially cold and wet, so how could hot and dry things, fire, earth, things like that, come out of it? And that was pretty unique. In addition to which, the original element, according to him, or he perceived, has to really be neutral as a result, neutral in quality, that is independent of the so-called elements. Back in ancient Greece, the elements that they thought about were earth, air, fire, water, things that they had, direct contact with. So the original element has to be neutral in quality, independent of that, and has to have both members of the opposites, of the pairs of opposites. It has to have actually hot and cold, wet and dry. So it has to be neutral. So as a result of that, he has to postulate, he conjectures, he says there must be, even though we can't see it, that we have to assume that there's a theoretical entity that explains the observable phenomena. First time anybody had a material theoretical entity. I mean, when you look at going back to Greek mythology, you might say, well, gee, the Greeks were supposing the gods to do certain things, and as a result, the gods were theoretical entities, and that's probably fair, but nobody thought the theoretical entity was actual matter, a material cause. The theoretical entity that was being postulated, just to, really focus in on it, was something beyond experience. That, though, in itself wasn't new. They had gods, but what was new was that they didn't they didn't personify it, make it into a person. Anthropomorphic. It's not an anthropomorphic thing. Anthropomorphic, like anthropology, studying of humans. They didn't make it have human characteristics. It's just another kind of stuff, a kind of matter, and that is why it was a very impressive kind of conjecture. However, there is a minor problem, difficulty, and that is, how can the apiron, this primordial mixture of whatever it was, hot, cold, wet, dry, and all the rest of the opposites, contain the opposites but give rise to a simple unity, one kind of thing. If you think about it, you think about this apiron sort of like mayonnaise or something else that's an emulsion. An emulsion is stuff that is held together with an agent but normally separates out. If any of you have ever seen or have had a real old jar of mayonnaise sitting in the refrigerator, sitting on the shelf, it probably takes years for this to happen, parts of it start to separate out. There's oil in it that separates out. The question is, what keeps these things in this mixture all together? So there is an apparent problem. But that's kind of a summary of Anaximander. And even though he was not the first one to think about material causes, he was the first one to really examine somebody else's theory and, based on that, think that there's problems and propose a solution to those problems.